My name is Khalid bin Faisal al-Rashid. I am 15 years old. I was born into one of the most powerful royal families in Saudi Arabia, and until last year, I had never been allowed to ask a single question about God. From the outside, my life looked like a dream. I lived in a palace overlooking the Red Sea. I was driven to school in armored convoys. I wore tailored thobes made by Italian designers. My tutors came from Oxford, Cairo, and Medina. I spoke 3 languages before I turned 12. Every door opened when I walked into a room. Every adult lowered their voice when they spoke to me. Every servant bowed their head. But inside those walls, there was one thing I was never allowed to do. Think. In our family, faith was not something you explored. It was something you inherited. Islam was not just our religion. It was our identity. It was our legitimacy. It was our power. My grandfather had been a religious authority before he became a political one. My father sat on councils that advised the government. My uncles oversaw religious foundations. Our name was mentioned in mosques. Our lineage was taught in schools. From the moment I could walk, I was taught what to believe. Allah is one. Muhammad is his prophet. The Koran is perfect. Questioning is rebellion. Doubt is sin. Every morning before sunrise, I prayed. Every afternoon I studied Quran. Every evening, I memorized hadith. By the time I was 10, I had memorized more scripture than most adults. By the time I was 13, I could lead prayers in front of grown men. By the time I was 15, I was expected to become the future. My father used to say, "You were not born to live a normal life, Khalid. You were born to protect a civilization." And I believed him. I believed that our kingdom was chosen by God. I believed that the West was corrupt. I believed that Christians were misguided. I believed that doubt was weakness. I believed everything. Until the day I saw a video I was never meant to see. It happened on a Thursday night. My parents were attending a diplomatic dinner. My tutors had left. The palace was quiet except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of the sea. I was in my room scrolling through my phone, jumping between football highlights and car reviews, when the algorithm did something strange. A video appeared on my screen in English. The title read, "Why I Left Islam and Found Jesus." I almost scrolled past it. I had been taught that these videos were propaganda, lies, psychological warfare, Western manipulation. But something made me pause. The man on the screen was Arab. He spoke with a Saudi accent. He was sitting in a simple room with a Bible on the table. And he looked calm, not angry, not hateful, not arrogant, just calm. He said, "I did not leave Islam because I hated it. I left because I started asking questions I was never allowed to ask." My heart started beating faster. He spoke about fear, about pressure, about pretending, about performing faith instead of feeling it. And then he said something that hit me like a punch to the chest. I realized I knew everything about God, but I did not know God. I stared at my screen, because for the first time in my life, someone had put into words what I had never dared to admit. I knew the rules. I knew the rituals. I knew the punishments. I knew the expectations. But I did not know God. I did not feel Him. I did not hear Him. I did not experience Him. I only feared Him. That night, for the first time, I searched something I had never searched before. Who is Jesus really? And in that moment, inside a palace built on certainty, the future crown prince of a kingdom where conversion is forbidden took his first step into a world that would change everything.
That first search should have ended everything. In my world, curiosity had a price, not a metaphorical one, a real one. Phones were monitored, browsers were filtered, tutors reported attitude changes. Even silence could be interpreted as defiance if it lasted too long. So when I typed, "Who is Jesus really?" my hands were sweating, even though I was alone. The results were a mess. Western church websites, Arabic apologetics forums, clips of sermons, arguments, counter-arguments, people yelling at each other in comment sections like faith was a sport. I closed it. Then I reopened it. Because something had already happened inside me, and I couldn't undo it. It was not a rebellion. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even doubt in the way my teachers described doubt. It was a simple, quiet realization. I had never been allowed to compare. In school, we learned about Christianity the way you learn about storms in a desert. From a distance, with warnings, as something to avoid. Christianity was presented as a corrupted branch of a story that Islam had corrected. That was the script. And in our home, the script was law. But the man in that video did something dangerous. He spoke about Jesus as if he was not an abstract idea, not a historical figure, not a name used in arguments. He spoke about Jesus like a person. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through the palace halls barefoot, past walls covered in art commissioned for kings, past rooms I wasn't even allowed to enter, past doors guarded by men who had known me since I was a child and still treated me like I was made of glass. Everything around me was designed to make me feel certain. But certainty is fragile. It cracks when a question becomes honest. The next morning, I sat in my private study room while my Koran tutor, Sheikh Nasser, recited verses with the calm authority of someone who had never wondered if he could be wrong. He was older, respected, and terrifying in a soft way. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. In our world, the calmest men were often the most powerful. I stared at the page in front of me. My mouth recited what I had memorized. My mind was somewhere else. Focus, he said, without looking up. Yes, Sheikh. I tried. I truly tried. Because the last thing I wanted was to become someone who lost control. A prince who couldn't concentrate. A boy who was affected. But then he started speaking, like he always did, after the memorization. He talked about the people of the book. He talked about misguidance. He talked about dangerous comparisons. And the word comparison made my chest tighten, because that was exactly what I was doing in secret. I waited until he paused, until he took a sip of tea. Then I said something I had never said before. Sheikh, may I ask a question? His eyes lifted slowly. The room felt colder. You may ask. I chose my words like someone walking through glass. If Jesus, Isa, is honored in our faith as a prophet, why do so many people in other countries love him like he is more than a prophet? The silence was instant, not the silence of interesting question. The silence of wrong move. Sheikh Nasser set his cup down with perfect control. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, which in my family was worse. Where did you hear this question? He asked. I just wondered. He leaned forward slightly. Wondering is not the same as seeking truth, Khalid. Wondering is how young men are taken by confusion. Confusion is how families collapse. Confusion is how nations fall. My throat went dry. He continued, voice still calm. There are people who speak about love because they want to soften you. They want to detach you from discipline. They want you to stop fearing God, so you stop obeying God. I nodded automatically, the way I had been trained to. But inside my head, a different thought rose. What if love isn't soft? What if love is the discipline? The lesson ended early, not officially. He simply closed the book, told me to review, and left the room faster than he usually did, like my question had contaminated the air. By noon, my father's assistant asked me to join the family lunch. I walked into the dining hall and felt it immediately. My mother smiled too carefully. My father didn't smile at all. And I realized my question had already traveled. In a palace of certainty, nothing stays private for long. That evening, as the call to prayer echoed outside the walls, my father finally spoke to me in the hallway, his tone quiet, controlled, and sharp. Khalid, he said, we need to talk. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. I wasn't just studying Christianity. I had already started a crisis. My father didn't raise his voice. He never had to. In our family, anger was not expressed like fire. It was expressed like ice, quiet, controlled, precise. The kind of calm that made grown men stand straighter and made servants look at the floor. He led me into his private office, a room I normally entered only when I was being praised, measured, or prepared for public appearances. Dark wood shelves, gold-trimmed frames, diplomatic gifts, a prayer rug in the corner, a desk that looked less like furniture and more like a command post. He gestured for me to sit. I sat. He watched me for a few seconds without speaking, as if he was deciding whether I was still his son or already a problem. "Your tutor told me you asked about Isa," he said. I swallowed. "Yes, father." "Why?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand for a clean explanation that could be filed away and controlled. I tried to sound normal. I just wondered why some people speak about him differently. My father leaned back slightly. "Some people," he repeated, as if the phrase itself irritated him. He tapped his finger once on the desk. Not nervous, not impatient. A signal, like a judge tapping a gavel. "Khalid," he said, "you are not like other boys. Other boys can afford confusion. They can afford to be influenced by trends and videos and outsiders." Videos. My stomach tightened. He knew. He continued. "You are a royal. Your mind is not your private playground. It belongs to your duty." I nodded. Again, automatically. The obedience was trained into me like language. But inside, something refused to relax, because I wasn't trying to be rebellious. I wasn't trying to become Western. I wasn't trying to shame our name. I was trying to understand something that suddenly felt important. My father stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the garden was bright, perfect, arranged. Everything in the palace was arranged. Even the trees looked disciplined. He spoke without turning around. "There are people who want to make you weak. They will not do it with weapons. They will do it with words, with emotions, with stories." He paused. "And Christianity is a story religion." I almost reacted, but I didn't. I stayed still. He turned back to me, eyes locked. "It starts like this," he said. "A question, a curiosity. Then you begin to compare. Then you begin to feel. Then you begin to believe that your feelings are truth." He leaned forward slightly. "And then you embarrass your bloodline." I felt the heat in my face. "Father," I said carefully, "I didn't say I believed anything. I only asked." He cut me off with one sentence. "You asked the wrong thing." Silence. Then he reached for something on his desk. A phone. He pressed a button, scrolled, then turned the screen toward me. It was the video, the same man, the same calm face, the same Bible on the table. My chest dropped. My father's expression didn't change. "Where did you see this?" In that moment, I had two choices: lie and keep my life stable, or tell the truth and set fire to everything. I stared at the screen for a second too long, and my father saw my hesitation like a professional. "You watched it," he said. I didn't answer. He continued, voice still controlled, but now edged with something colder. "Do you know what happens when a royal boy watches forbidden material and asks forbidden questions?" I shook my head, slowly. He looked at me as if explaining basic law. "It becomes a security issue." The words hit me harder than anger would have. Security. That meant advisors, monitoring, restrictions, people deciding what I could access, who I could speak to, where I could go. It meant I was no longer a son who needed guidance. I was a risk that needed containment. My father set the phone down. "You will stop," he said. "No more questions. No more comparisons. No more English religious content. No more curiosity." He stood there and held my gaze. "And if your tutor reports another incident, you will be removed from your normal routine until this is corrected." Removed. I understood what that meant too. A kind of isolation that looks like care from the outside, but feels like a cage from the inside. My voice was quiet. Yes, Father. He nodded once, as if the matter was solved. But the matter wasn't solved. Because when he turned away, something happened inside me that I did not expect. Instead of fear stopping me, fear sharpened me. That night, after everyone was asleep, I took my phone and went into the only place in the palace where I felt like I could breathe. The storage wing, old furniture, empty rooms, boxes sealed with dust, silence. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, turned my screen brightness down until it was barely visible, and I searched again. Not with curiosity this time, with urgency. Jesus claims. Gospel of John Arabic. Why Christians believe Jesus is the Son of God. And then I found something that truly changed everything. A clip. Short, subtitled in Arabic. A man reading words from the Bible, not debating, not attacking Islam, not insulting anyone, just reading. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was watching propaganda. I felt like I was being addressed. And that was the moment the story stopped being an interest and became a turning point. In Saudi Arabia, belief is not private. It is public law. It is cultural identity. It is political legitimacy. Faith is not something you choose. It is something you are born into. And doubt is not a phase. It is a threat. After my conversation with my father, everything changed. But nothing looked different. I still woke before dawn. I still prayed. I still studied. I still wore the clothes chosen for me. I still ate meals prepared by chefs who had memorized my preferences. From the outside, I was the same prince. Inside, I was carrying a secret that could destroy my family. I learned quickly how dangerous silence could be. Every movement was watched. Every tutor filed reports. Every assistant listened. Every driver observed. In our world, privacy was a luxury reserved for those who had nothing to lose. I had everything to lose. And yet, every night, I returned to the same words, the same man, the same voice, the same sentence. I am the way, the truth, and the life. It didn't sound like poetry. It didn't sound like philosophy. It sounded like certainty. That was the part that terrified me, because certainty was supposed to belong to us. We were the ones who had been raised on absolutes. We were the ones taught that the truth was settled. We were the ones who believed we had the final word. And yet, here was a man, 2,000 years ago, speaking with a confidence that crossed centuries and borders and languages, not commanding armies, not issuing laws, not ruling empires, just speaking. And people were still listening. One night, I watched a documentary filmed in secret inside an underground church in the Middle East. The believers gathered quietly, whispering prayers, reading from phones, singing without music. They were afraid, but they were peaceful. They were not plotting. They were not angry. They were not violent. They were simply devoted. A woman said, "We follow Jesus because he is alive." Alive. In Islam, Isa is honored, but he is not alive. In Christianity, Jesus is not just remembered. He is followed. That distinction haunted me. At school, I asked my history tutor about the Roman Empire. "How did Christianity spread?" I asked casually. He shrugged. "Through conquest and politics." But every source I read said something else. It spread through persecution, through poverty, through ordinary people who refused to stop believing. And I couldn't understand why. If Christianity was a lie, why did people die for it? If Jesus was a fraud, why did empires try so hard to erase him? If it was all propaganda, why did his words still move hearts across cultures that had nothing in common? I started writing notes in my phone, questions I could never ask out loud. Why does Jesus speak with authority? Why does he forgive instead of punish? Why does he call God Father? Why does he choose fishermen instead of kings? Why does he accept death instead of escaping it? In our faith, prophets were strong, warriors, leaders. Jesus looked different. He looked humble. One night, I watched a debate between a Christian scholar and a Muslim apologist. It was supposed to prove Christianity wrong. Instead, it confused me more. The Christian didn't attack Islam. He didn't mock the Koran. He didn't insult Muhammad. He simply kept returning to one question. Who do you say Jesus is? And the Muslim speaker kept circling around it. Prophet, messenger, servant, but never savior, never son, never Lord. The debate ended without resolution. But my mind didn't. Days passed, then weeks. My tutors noticed I was distracted. My mother noticed I was quieter. My sisters noticed I prayed differently, slower, less mechanical. My father noticed nothing. He believed obedience meant loyalty, but obedience can hide transformation. One evening, during a family dinner, my uncle mentioned a Western journalist who had criticized religious restrictions in the kingdom. He was deported, my uncle said proudly. We don't tolerate ideological corruption. My father nodded. Belief is not negotiable. My mother remained silent. I felt my heart beating in my ears, because I was sitting at a table where every man believed that faith was a weapon, and I was beginning to believe it was a relationship. Later that night, I stood on the palace balcony, looking out at the city lights. Jeddah stretched endlessly, alive with traffic, towers, mosques, malls, millions of people living inside a system built on certainty. And I felt completely alone. For the first time in my life, I prayed without ritual. I didn't face Mecca. I didn't recite verses. I didn't follow structure. I whispered, Jesus, if you are real, I need to understand. The air didn't move. No light appeared. No voice answered. But something changed, not around me, inside me. And I knew I was no longer just studying Christianity. I was standing at the edge of a decision that could cost me my name, my family, my country, and possibly my life. In our family, tradition was not history. It was law. Our name carried weight because it had been carried carefully for generations. Every marriage was strategic. Every public appearance was calculated. Every belief was inherited like property. We did not become who we were. We were born who we were. My grandfather used to say, a royal family does not adapt to the world adapts to us. He had ruled with influence, not with office. His voice had shaped policy. His opinions had shaped doctrine. His approval had shaped careers. When he entered a room, ministers stood. When he spoke, scholars listened. And when he prayed, cameras recorded. Our family represented stability. We were presented as the bridge between faith and state, between heritage and future. We were the proof that Saudi Arabia did not need to change, which meant I was not just a son. I was a symbol. From a young age, I was trained in presence, how to walk into a room, how to shake hands, how to look into cameras, how to speak without revealing doubt, how to listen without revealing disagreement. My sisters were trained differently. They learned elegance, discipline, silence. They learned how to sit, how to lower their eyes, how to never be the center. My mother had been trained before them. She had grown up in a household even stricter than ours. A family where obedience was praised more than intelligence, where submission was called virtue, where questions were interpreted as rebellion. She was beautiful, calm, devout. She prayed 5 times a day, without fail. She fasted without complaint. She never raised her voice. She believed deeply. But belief in our family was not joy. It was responsibility. My father embodied that. He was not cruel. He was disciplined. He believed that love meant protection and protection meant control. He believed that weakness invited invasion, and that doubt invited chaos. He loved us the way a general loves his soldiers. He wanted us strong, prepared, unquestioning. At dinner, we did not discuss personal dreams. We discussed the nation. We discussed business. We discussed alliances. We discussed loyalty. Religion was not debated. It was assumed. And yet, as I sat at that table, carrying questions I could never speak, I began to see my family differently. I saw how every conversation returned to power. Who controls the narrative? Who controls the youth? Who controls the future? Faith was not about God. It was about order. One evening, my cousin Faisal visited with his father. Faisal was 18, already studying political science in London, already being groomed for leadership. He spoke openly about Western culture. They pretend to be free, he said, but they worship chaos. No discipline, no hierarchy, no respect. My uncle nodded. They confuse choice with truth. My father looked at me. Remember this, Khalid. Freedom without structure destroys civilizations. I nodded. But inside, I remembered the underground church. I remembered the woman who whispered, "Jesus is alive." They had no power, no weapons, no state, and yet they were not chaotic. They were peaceful. That contradiction bothered me. Later that night, I asked my mother something I had never asked before. "Mother, do you ever feel afraid of God?" She looked at me with surprise. "Fear of God is wisdom," she replied automatically. "But do you feel close to him?" She hesitated. A pause so small, no one else would have noticed it. But I did. "I feel obedient," she said. I nodded. I understood, because obedience was the foundation of our family. Not love, not relationship, not trust, obedience. In our home, obedience kept the structure intact. It kept the hierarchy clear. It kept the name powerful. But obedience does not answer questions. It only silences them. That night, I sat in my room and wrote something I never would have dared write on paper. If God is a father, why do I feel like a servant? I deleted it immediately. But the thought stayed. The next week, my father announced that a foreign delegation would visit the palace. Christian diplomats from Europe. I was expected to attend. It was a routine meeting. Trade, infrastructure, technology. But when I shook hands with them, I felt something strange. They looked normal. They were polite, respectful, calm, not corrupt, not immoral, not threatening. They thanked us for hospitality. They admired our architecture. They praised our culture. One of them, a man with silver hair and kind eyes, said quietly, "Your country is beautiful. Your people are strong. I pray for peace between our nations." He said it naturally, not politically, not strategically, just sincerely. That night, I searched his name. He was a Christian, and he had spent decades working in conflict zones, negotiating peace treaties, helping refugees, not destroying civilizations, saving lives. I stared at his photo for a long time, and then I whispered something I never thought I would whisper. What if we were wrong? That thought was dangerous, not just to me, to my entire family, because in a family that ruled by tradition, the greatest threat was not rebellion. It was awakening. In Saudi Arabia, the law does not ask what you believe. It tells you. Faith is written into the legal code, into the education system, into public life. There is no separation between mosque and state. There is no line between religion and rule, and there is no room for conversion. To leave Islam is not considered a personal decision. It is considered betrayal, not only of God, but of family, of tribe, of nation. Apostasy is not treated as confusion, it is treated as infection. That reality settled over me slowly, like a shadow that grows longer at sunset. I began noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The posters warning against foreign ideologies, the sermons about protecting the purity of belief, the news stories about arrests for online speech. I saw how tightly controlled the narrative was, how carefully information was filtered, how easily people disappeared from public life, how quickly reputations were erased. And I realized something that made my hands shake. If I was discovered, I would not be protected by my name. I would be punished by it. Royal families do not tolerate embarrassment. They erase it. One afternoon, I overheard my father speaking with a security advisor in the majlis. They spoke in low voices, but the walls of the palace carry sound. A young man in Medina, the advisor said, university student, converted online, was sharing Christian content. What happened? My father asked. He was detained. His family has disowned him. He will be sent for re-education. Re-education, a word that sounds soft and means everything. It meant isolation. It meant pressure. It meant psychological breaking. It meant being surrounded by scholars until your mind collapsed back into obedience. I stood frozen behind the door. Because I was not a university student, I was a prince. And if a student could be erased quietly, what would they do to me? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The words of Jesus echoed in my mind. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Freedom. In my world, freedom was dangerous. Freedom meant unpredictability. Unpredictability meant instability. Instability meant threat. I thought about the Christians I had seen, the underground church, the diplomats, the man in the video. They were not afraid of God. They trusted Him. I had been raised to fear, to submit, to never question. And yet, everything inside me was pushing me toward the very thing my world forbade. Belief, not inherited belief, chosen belief. I began hiding my searches better. VPNs, encrypted browsers, offline downloads. I watched sermons from pastors who spoke Arabic. I listened to testimonies of Muslims who had converted. Every story was different, but every story had the same cost. Loss of family, loss of country, loss of safety, and yet every face carried peace. Not happiness, peace. A peace I had never seen in the mosques of my childhood. One night, I found a digital Arabic Bible. I downloaded it. My finger hovered over the screen for a long moment. This was no longer curiosity. This was possession. If discovered, it would be evidence. I pressed download. When it finished, I felt like I had crossed a line. I opened the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. The language was simple. The message was heavy. It spoke of light in darkness, of life in death, of grace instead of law. It spoke of a God who did not wait for perfection. It spoke of a God who came down. I read for hours about the woman caught in sin, about the blind man healed, about the thief forgiven on the cross. No punishments, no courts, no re-education, only mercy, only love, only truth. At 3 a.m, I closed my phone and sat in the darkness. My heart was pounding, because I understood now. Following Jesus in my country was not just difficult, it was illegal, it was dangerous, it was a sentence. And yet, the more I read, the more I felt something I had never felt in all my years of faith. Hope. Not hope for status, not hope for power, not hope for approval, hope for salvation, hope that God was not far away, hope that He saw me, hope that He loved me. I whispered into the dark, if you are real, I will follow you, even if it costs me everything. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be afraid, not of punishment, but of walking away from truth. There are moments in life when everything slows down, not because time actually changes, but because your mind knows something is about to happen that cannot be undone. The night the palace went silent was one of those moments. It began like every other evening. The sun dropped into the Red Sea. The call to prayer echoed through the city. The palace lights turned on one by one. Servants moved quietly through the halls. Dinner was served on schedule. Nothing looked different, but I felt it. A pressure in my chest, a weight behind my eyes, a sense that I was standing on the edge of something irreversible. I had finished reading the Gospel of John earlier that day. I had read about the cross, about the betrayal, about the trial, about the silence before the execution. And when I closed my phone, I whispered the words that would change my life. Jesus, I believe you. Not loudly, not dramatically, not for anyone else to hear, just me, just Him. I did not feel a vision. I did not hear a voice. There was no flash of light. But something happened. The fear that had ruled my faith my entire life left. In its place came a calm I had never known. Not confidence, peace. That night at dinner, I barely spoke. My father discussed infrastructure projects. My uncle spoke about oil investments. My mother listened quietly. My sisters exchanged looks when they thought no one was watching. And I sat there knowing that I no longer belonged to the world that raised me. After dinner, my father announced that security protocols would be updated. Recent ideological threats, he said. We are increasing monitoring. My stomach tightened. Phones, internet, visitors, movements, everything. When the servants cleared the table, my father stood. Khalid, he said, come with me. My heart began to race. He led me down a hallway I rarely walked, past the guest suites, past the diplomatic wing, past rooms sealed for years. We stopped in front of a door guarded by two men. They opened it without a word. Inside was a room I had never seen. No decoration, no art, no luxury, just a table, two chairs, a camera in the corner. My father closed the door behind us. Sit. I sat. He did not. He stood across from me like a judge. Your tutors have noticed changes, he said. Your behavior, your attention, your discipline. I said nothing. Your internet activity has raised concerns. I felt my hands grow cold. This family does not tolerate ideological instability, he continued. You are being evaluated. Evaluated. The word landed like a sentence. He pressed a button on the table. The camera light turned red. Tell me, he said calmly, what you believe. The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels loud. I thought of my sisters, my mother, my name, my future. I thought of the Christians who had lost everything, of the underground church, of the man in the video. And I thought of Jesus. I lifted my eyes. I believe in God, I said. My father nodded slowly. Which God? The air felt heavy. The God of Abraham, I said. His jaw tightened. Which path? I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I understood the cost. I believe in Jesus. The silence that followed was absolute. No air movement, no sound from the hall, no footsteps. My father stared at me, not angry, not shocked, disappointed. As if I had failed an exam I was never meant to pass. He spoke quietly. You do not understand what you're saying? I do, I replied. You're confused. No, I said. I am certain. His eyes hardened. Certainty belongs to this family. I took a breath. Then perhaps this family has been wrong. The room froze. My father turned slowly and looked at the camera, then back at me. "You are not just my son," he said. "You are the future of this bloodline." "I am still your son," I said. "But I belong to Jesus." The words sounded unreal even to me, but they were true. My father pressed the button again. The camera turned off. He walked to the door and opened it. 2 guards stepped inside. "Take him to his room," he said. "He is not to leave. He is not to use any devices. He is not to speak to anyone without supervision." They took my phone, my tablet, my access cards. They walked me through the palace in silence. Servants looked away. Guards stood still. Lights dimmed as we passed. When they closed my door, the palace became silent, not quiet. Silent. No notifications, no messages, no voices, just me and the decision I had made. I sat on my bed in the darkness. I felt fear, real fear, the kind that lives in your bones. But beneath it was something stronger, faith. For the first time in my life, my belief was not inherited. It was chosen. And whatever happened next, I knew one thing. There was no going back. The door opened without warning. No knock, no announcement, no warning footsteps. Just the sound of the lock turning and the quiet weight of authority entering my room. My father stepped inside alone. He closed the door behind him. For the first time in my life, he did not look like a ruler. He looked like a man carrying a storm. His white thobe was perfectly pressed as always. His posture was straight. His face was controlled. But his eyes were different. They were searching, not commanding, not judging. Searching. He gestured toward the chair across from my bed. "Sit." I sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The palace around us hummed softly with electricity and distant air conditioning. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. But inside that room, history was bending. "You have embarrassed me," he said quietly. I nodded. "You have frightened your mother." I lowered my eyes. "You have unsettled men who advise kings." I looked up. "And yet," he continued, "you do not. Look afraid." I met his gaze. "I am afraid," I said, "but I am not lost." His jaw tightened. "You were not raised to think like this." "I was raised to obey," I replied. "I was never raised to know God." The words hung between us. He stood and walked to the window. From there, you could see the city stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Towers, mosques, highways, ships in the harbor. A kingdom built on certainty. "You think you have discovered something new?" he said. "But millions before you have been confused, and millions after you will be." "I am not confused," I said. "I am convinced." He turned. "Of what?" "That God is not distant," I said. "That he came to us, that he loves us, that he forgives." His eyes narrowed. "You think Islam teaches hatred?" "No," I said. "I think it teaches submission. Christianity teaches transformation." Silence. "You think Jesus is God?" he said. "Yes." "You think the cross saves you?" "Yes." "You think following him is worth losing everything?" I swallowed. "Yes." My father walked closer. "You are 15 years old," he said. "You have lived a protected life. You have never known hunger. You have never known war. You have never known exile. You think belief is a poem. It is not. It is blood." "I am ready to bleed," I said quietly. He stared at me. In that moment, he did not see a prince. He saw a man willing to lose his crown. "Do you know what they will say?" he asked. "Do you know what this means for our name? Do you know what happens to families that lose control of their heirs?" "Yes," I said. "They disappear." His voice dropped. "And yet you still choose this?" "Yes." He turned away again. When he spoke, his voice was lower. "Tell me," he said, "what did you feel when you first believed?" I hesitated, then answered honestly, "Peace." He exhaled slowly. "You know what I feel every day?" he said. "Responsibility, fear, pressure, the weight of a nation that cannot afford doubt." He turned to me. "You think God cares about your feelings?" "I think He created them." He shook his head. "You think God bends to your heart?" "No," I said. "I think He changes it." That stopped him. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Not weakness, conflict. "You are asking me to betray everything I have built," he said. "I am asking you to meet the one who built you," I replied. The room went quiet. My father walked to the door. He placed his hand on the handle. "Your confinement will continue," he said. "Your tutors will be replaced. Your access will remain restricted. You will be observed." He paused. "But you will not be punished." I looked at him. "Why?" He did not turn around. "Because," he said, "if I am wrong, then everything I have taught you is wrong." And then he left. The door closed. The lock clicked. And I realized something terrifying. The throne was no longer stable, not because of rebellion, but because truth had entered the room. My mother came to my room just before dawn. She did not wear her abaya. She did not wear jewelry. Her hair was uncovered, falling loosely around her shoulders. I had never seen her like that before. In our family, appearance was discipline, and discipline was devotion. She closed the door quietly behind her and stood there for a moment, as if she was afraid the walls might listen. "Khalid," she whispered. I sat up. Her eyes were red, not from anger, from crying. She walked to the chair beside my bed and sat down slowly, folding her hands together the way she did when she prayed. "I could not sleep," she said. "I cannot think." I waited. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and love that made my chest tighten. "You have broken something in this house," she said softly. "I didn't want to," I replied. "I just told the truth." She nodded. "That is what frightens me." She reached for my hand. When she touched me, I felt how cold her fingers were. "I raised you to obey God," she said. "I raised you to fear Him. I raised you to follow the path of our fathers." Her voice trembled. "And now you tell me that the path is wrong." "I tell you there is more," I said. "Not instead of God, but closer to Him." She closed her eyes. "You are asking me to choose between my faith and my son." I shook my head. "I am asking you to see the God who chose you." She opened her eyes. "Do you know what happens to women who lose their families in this country?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "They disappear," she said. "Quietly." I swallowed. "Your father is powerful," she continued. "But even he cannot protect us from the law, from the scholars, from the court of public opinion." She leaned closer. "You think you are strong enough for this, but I carried you for 9 months. I watched you learn to walk. I held you when you were afraid of the dark. I taught you your first prayer." Her voice broke. "And now you tell me you are ready to lose me." "I don't want to lose you," I said. "I want to walk with you." She shook her head. "You are still a boy," she said. "You think love is enough." "It is," I replied, "because God is love." She looked at me sharply. "That is not our theology." "No," I said. "It is His." The room was silent. She stood and walked to the window. The first light of morning was creeping over the city. "Khalid," she said, "do you know what my mother told me on my wedding day?" I shook my head. She said, "Your duty is not happiness. Your duty is honor." She turned to me. "And now my son is asking me to choose happiness." I am asking you to choose truth. She stared at me for a long time. Then she whispered, "What if you are wrong?" "Then I lose everything," I said. "But if I am right, then I have found God." She sat back down. Her hands were shaking. "Tell me about him," she said. I hesitated. "About Jesus?" "Yes." I took a breath. I told her about the words I had read, about the forgiveness, about the mercy, about the cross, about the resurrection. I told her about a God who did not wait on a throne, about a God who walked among people, about a God who washed feet instead of demanding bows. I told her about a God who loved sinners, who touched the unclean, who ate with outcasts. I told her about a God who did not rule by fear. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, tears were streaming down her face. "He sounds kind," she said. "He is," I replied. She looked down. "All my life I have tried to be good enough for God," she whispered. "All my life I have tried not to fail him." "You don't have to be enough," I said. "He already is." She covered her mouth. "If I follow you," she said, "I lose my world." "If you follow him," I replied, "you gain eternity." She stood slowly. "I need time," she said. "I understand." She walked to the door. Before opening it, she turned back. "Khalid, if you are wrong, you destroy us." I nodded. "And if I am right," I said, "he will save us." She left, and I sat there, knowing that the next decision would not be mine. It would be hers, and it would change our family forever. My father did not sleep that night. I know this because when the morning call to prayer echoed through the city, he was already awake, already dressed, already standing on the balcony overlooking the sea. From my room, I could see him in the distance, a solitary figure against a kingdom that expected certainty. For the first time in my life, I saw my father not as a ruler, but as a man standing at a crossroads. By noon, the palace was restless. Advisors moved in and out of private rooms. Phones rang and stopped ringing. Security tightened around the compound. Something was happening, something bigger than me. That afternoon, my father summoned the senior council, not government ministers, not political allies, family, uncles, cousins, trusted advisors, religious authorities tied to our bloodline. They gathered in the great hall where decisions had shaped careers and countries. I was not invited, but I could hear the voices. Through the doors, through the walls, through the silence, they spoke of shame, of danger, of reputation. They spoke of precedent. A royal cannot defect ideologically. A prince is not an individual. A family is a state. They spoke of correction, of isolation, of control. They spoke of removing me from public life, of sending me abroad, of surrounding me with scholars, of rewriting the narrative. They did not speak of truth. They spoke of containment. My father listened. For hours. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He did not defend me. He absorbed every word. Then, when they finished, he stood. The room fell silent. "I built this family on discipline," he said. "I built its name on loyalty. I built its future on control." He looked at every man in the room. "But I did not build it on lies." A murmur moved through the hall. "Your nephew has crossed a line," one of my uncles said. "He is confused." My father shook his head. "He is not confused. He is convinced." "That is worse," another replied. My father walked forward. "You think I'm afraid of scandal," he said. "You think I fear embarrassment. You think I will sacrifice my son to protect our image." He paused. "You are wrong." The room froze. "My son has challenged me," he continued. "He has challenged our theology. He has challenged our certainty. He has challenged our authority." His voice hardened, and instead of crushing him, I listened. One of the scholars spoke. Listening to heresy is how nations fall. My father turned to him. Blind obedience is how they rot. No one had ever spoken to a scholar like that in our house. You ask me to choose between my name and my blood, my father said. You ask me to choose between control and conscience. He looked at the floor. For the first time in my life, I do not know which one is right. The room went silent. And in that silence, something extraordinary happened. My mother stood. She had not been invited to speak. Women never were, but she stood anyway. My son is not broken, she said. He is not corrupt. He is not rebellious. She looked at my father. He is searching for God. The council erupted. This is madness. This is Western poison. This is a threat. My father raised his hand. Enough. He turned to my mother. Do you believe him? She hesitated. Then she said, I believe he is sincere. That was all. But sincerity is dangerous in a system built on fear. The meeting ended without resolution. The advisors left unsettled. The scholars left furious. The family left divided. That evening, my father came to my room again. He did not sit. He did not command. He stood in the center of the room like a man standing in a storm. You have forced me to look at everything I built, he said. You have forced me to question men I trusted. You have forced me to confront a faith I never examined. I waited. Do you know what it means for a man like me to doubt? He asked. It means he is finally honest, I said. He almost smiled. Tell me, he said, if I follow your path, what happens to me? You lose your power, I said. You lose your protection. You lose your kingdom. And what do I gain? I looked at him. God? He closed his eyes. For a long time he said nothing. Then he whispered, I have ruled men. I have shaped law. I have commanded loyalty. He opened his eyes. But I have never known peace. The wind moved the curtains. The call to prayer echoed again. And for the first time, my father did not answer it. He looked at me and said, if your God is real, then he is about to face a king. The decision was not made in a meeting. It was made in silence. 3 days after the council gathered, my father called me to his private study. No guards, no advisors, no cameras, just him and me. He closed the door. I have spent my life controlling narratives, he said. I know how stories work. I know how power protects itself. He sat across from me, and I know when silence is no longer possible. I felt my pulse in my ears. There are rumors, he continued. Questions. Whispers. He folded his hands. You cannot hide a prince. I nodded. What are you thinking? I asked. He looked at me. If we say nothing, they will decide for us. They will write our story. They will shape the truth. He leaned forward. So we will speak first. The idea was terrifying. In Saudi Arabia, public confession was unheard of. Public doubt was unthinkable. Public conversion was suicidal. But my father had always believed in controlling the battlefield. And now the battlefield was belief. We will leave the country, he said, quietly, legally, before anyone moves against us. And then, I asked. And then, he said, we tell the world. 2 weeks later, we were no longer in the kingdom. No palace, no convoy, no guards, just a private residence in a European city that had agreed to protect us. For the first time in my life, I walked down a street without an escort. For the first time, I saw churches with open doors. For the first time, I heard people speak about God without fear. And for the first time, my father removed his title from his name. He became just a man, a man about to challenge an empire. The interview was arranged through an international media organization that specialized in religious freedom reporting. They knew exactly what they were doing. They understood the impact: a Saudi royal family, a teenage prince, a public conversion. This was not news. It was an earthquake. The filming took place in a quiet studio. White walls, soft lighting, no symbols, no flags, just chairs, just microphones, just truth. I went first. They asked me to introduce myself. I looked into the camera. My name is Khalid bin Faisal al-Rashid. I am 15 years old. I was born into one of the most powerful royal families in Saudi Arabia, and I am a follower of Jesus Christ. The room went still. I spoke about my upbringing, about tradition, about control, about fear. I spoke about the questions I was never allowed to ask. I spoke about the video, about the Bible, about discovering a God who loved instead of ruled. I spoke about the cost. I know what this means, I said. I know what I lose. But I also know what I have found. Then my mother spoke. Her voice shook. She spoke about obedience, about duty, about silence. She spoke about raising a son in a world where doubt is punished. And then she said, "My son taught me that God does not live in fear." The interviewer struggled to hide emotion. Then my father. The cameras rolled. The world waited. He looked directly into the lens. "My name is Faisal al-Rashid," he said. "I was raised to protect Islam. I built my life on certainty. I ruled by discipline." He paused. "And I was wrong." The room held its breath. "I believed God demanded submission," he continued. "I believed faith was law. I believed obedience was righteousness." He shook his head. "But I never knew him." He looked at me. "My son showed me a God who forgives, a God who sacrifices, a God who does not rule from fear." He turned back to the camera. "I have lost my kingdom. I have lost my title. I have lost my protection." He placed his hand over his heart. "But I have found Christ." When the cameras stopped, no one spoke. The crew sat in silence. They knew. They were holding history. The video was released 48 hours later. No warning, no promotion, no press release. Just a title: 15-year-old Saudi royal prince and entire family converts to Christianity. The first million views came in 6 hours. The second million came before midnight. By morning, the story was everywhere. News networks, social media, Telegram channels, WhatsApp groups. Christians shared it with tears. Muslims shared it with fury. Governments monitored it with concern. Headlines exploded. Saudi royal family defects. Prince abandons Islam. Faith crisis in the kingdom. Royal apostasy shocks the Middle East. Hashtags trended across continents. My name was translated into dozens of languages. And somewhere in Saudi Arabia, men who had once bowed to my father were now calling him a traitor. The internet did what the palace never could. It made our story unstoppable. And the world was watching. The reaction did not begin with anger. It began with silence. For 12 hours after the interview went viral, the Saudi government said nothing. No statement, no denial, no condemnation. In the Middle East, silence is never empty. It is preparation. By the next morning, my father's phone started ringing without pause. Numbers he recognized, numbers he had not seen in years, numbers that were never meant to call him again. Old allies, former advisors, distant relatives, men who once owed him favors. Their voices were no longer respectful. They were urgent. "You need to delete it. You need to deny it. You need to come back immediately. You have crossed a red line." One of them whispered, "They are furious." Another said, "You have embarrassed the kingdom." A third said only one sentence, "You are no longer protected. That afternoon, the official response arrived. A short statement issued by the Ministry of Information. No names, no details, no emotion, just law. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia rejects all attempts to undermine the Islamic identity of the nation. Individuals who promote apostasy, false ideologies, or foreign propaganda will be held accountable under Saudi law. Within minutes, state-controlled media began publishing coordinated articles. Western media exploits naive teenager. Foreign forces manipulate royal family member. Psychological warfare against Islam. They did not call me a traitor. They called me a victim. Brainwashed, deceived, used. My father was described as unstable, emotionally compromised, politically irresponsible. Our family name was removed from official websites. Photographs disappeared. Mentions vanished. It was as if we had never existed. That is how power punishes without blood. It erases. Then came the religious response. Senior scholars issued fatwas condemning apostasy. They spoke of severe consequences, of dangerous influence, of protecting the youth. Friday sermons across the country warned against Western corruption. Imams spoke about wolves in sheep's clothing, about false prophets, about those who abandon the path. Without naming me, they described me. A young man led astray, a family infected, a lesson to be remembered. My mother watched the broadcasts in silence. My sister stopped reading social media. My father closed his phone because the threats had started. Not general ones, specific ones. Messages sent to private accounts, photos of our old home, names of our former staff, addresses of distant relatives. One message said, "We know where your blood lives." Another said, "You left Islam. Islam will not leave you." The European authorities increased our protection. We moved to a secure residence. Guards at the gate, surveillance cameras, restricted movement. For the first time, I understood what exile meant. Not just leaving your country, but becoming hunted by it. And yet, something unexpected happened. While Saudi Arabia tried to erase us, the world amplified us. Churches held prayer meetings. Christian networks replayed the interview. Human rights organizations issued statements. Letters arrived from Iran, from Egypt, from Pakistan, from Indonesia. Messages from Muslims who had questions, who were afraid, who were searching, who whispered faith in secret. One message said, "I watched your interview alone in my room. I cried. I have believed in Jesus for 2 years, but I am too afraid to tell anyone. Now I know I am not alone." Another said, "If a prince can stand for Christ, maybe I can too." My father read every message. He did not speak, but I saw his hands tremble, not from fear, from responsibility, because our story was no longer just ours. It had become a spark, and sparks in dry land become fires. The kingdom had tried to silence us. Instead, it had made us impossible to ignore. And that was when we understood something crucial. We were no longer refugees. We were witnesses, and the world was listening. Exile does not arrive with drama. It arrives with quiet. No crowds, no farewell, no ceremony, just a door that closes behind you and a world that no longer answers when you call. 1 month after the interview, our new life had settled into a strange routine. Security briefings in the morning, restricted routes when we left the house, unmarked cars waiting at corners, names replaced with codes. We were no longer a royal family. We were a protected asset. The irony was impossible to ignore. In Saudi Arabia, we had lived inside walls of gold. Now we lived behind walls of concrete. In the kingdom, we were untouchable. Now we were vulnerable. And yet, for the first time in my life, I felt free. I could walk into a church. I could carry a Bible. I could speak about Jesus out loud. No fear of arrest, no fear of accusation, no fear of re-education, just belief, just choice, just truth. But freedom came with grief. I missed my country, not the politics, not the power, not the system. I missed the sea breeze on the Corniche, the smell of cardamom in the morning, the sound of prayer echoing across the city, the rhythm of a culture that had shaped me. I missed my cousins, my childhood friends, the servants who had watched me grow up. I missed a version of my life that no longer existed. My sisters struggled the most. They had grown up inside a world of structure. Now everything was open. Schools where girls spoke freely, teachers who encouraged questions, classmates who invited them to birthday parties. They were not used to choice. My mother walked differently now. In Saudi Arabia, she had moved with discipline. Here, she moved with curiosity. She asked questions in church. She joined women's Bible studies. She laughed more. Sometimes, I caught her standing by the window, watching the street, absorbing a world she had never been allowed to see. She once told me quietly, "I feel like I am living my first life." My father carried exile like a burden, not regret, responsibility. He had lost everything he had built: his influence, his wealth, his alliances, his authority. Men who once bowed now cursed his name. Institutions he once shaped now erased his legacy. He was no longer a prince, he was a witness. And witnesses live dangerously. One evening, we sat together in the living room. A modest space, no palace, no servants, no marble, just couches, lamps, and silence. My father looked at me. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "I regret the pain," I said. "I regret the fear. I regret the loss." Then I looked at him. "But I do not regret the truth." He nodded. "I ruled men," he said. "I commanded loyalty. I shaped law." He exhaled. "But I never knew who I was until I lost everything." He looked at my sisters. "They will grow up free," he said. "They will choose their faith. They will choose their future." He turned to me. "You broke the chain." That night, I wrote something in my journal. Not for the internet, not for the world, just for me. I was born a prince. I chose to become a disciple. Exile stripped us of titles, but it gave us purpose. We were no longer defined by bloodline. We were defined by belief, and belief had cost us a kingdom, but it had given us a calling. Freedom did not make us invisible. It made us famous. After the interview, our story did not fade into yesterday's news cycle. It became a reference point, a symbol, a lightning rod. Every week, another outlet requested an interview. Every month, another documentary crew asked for access. Every conference wanted my father to speak. We had crossed from royalty into something stranger. We had become a story the world wanted to tell. In Europe, journalists followed us through airports. In America, churches filled auditoriums to hear my testimony. In Africa and Asia, underground believers shared our video on encrypted phones. I was 15, and my face was on screens in countries I had never visited. My name was translated into languages I could not read. Some people called me brave, others called me reckless. Some called me a hero, others called me a traitor. But no one called me invisible. At first, the attention felt unreal. I had grown up surrounded by power, but not curiosity. People respected my title. They did not care about my thoughts. Now it was the opposite. I had lost my title, and people wanted my voice. At a conference in Germany, I stood on a stage in front of 3,000 people. Cameras, lights, translators, and glass booths. The host introduced me as the prince who chose Christ over a kingdom. I hated the phrase. because I did not feel like a prince. I felt like a boy who had followed a question too far to turn back. When I spoke, I did not talk about politics. I did not attack Islam. I did not insult my country. I talked about fear, about silence, about the cost of truth. I talked about Jesus, about forgiveness, about grace, about a God who did not demand perfection. The audience stood. Some cried. Afterwards, a woman from Iran came to me. She whispered, "My brother was killed for converting. Thank you for speaking for him." In France, a young man said, "My family disowned me last year. Your story gave me courage." In Indonesia, a girl messaged me, "I watch your interview every night. It reminds me that God sees me." I began to understand something. We had not just left Saudi Arabia, we had entered a global conversation. And that conversation was dangerous. Our security team expanded. Our movements were planned days in advance. Locations were changed at the last minute. Threats continued. Some were empty, some were not. Once, after an event in London, our driver was forced to take an alternate route because of suspicious activity near the venue. Another time, a man attempted to approach me in a hotel lobby, shouting that I had betrayed my blood. The world was not just watching, it was reacting. My father refused to stop. "They silenced us at home," he said. "Now we speak for those who cannot." He founded an organization that supported converts from Islam, legal aid, safe housing, trauma counseling. My mother built a network for women who had fled forced marriages and religious persecution. My sisters attended a Christian school where they learned history that was not filtered. They asked questions, they debated, they dreamed, and I traveled. Church to church, conference to conference, university to university. Always the same introduction, always the same shock. A Saudi prince who chose Jesus. But what people never saw was the quiet. The hotel rooms where I lay awake thinking of my cousins. The moments I smelled oud perfume and felt homesick. The dreams where I walked through the palace again. Freedom has a shadow. It is called memory. One night, in a hotel in Toronto, I stood by the window looking out at the city lights. 1,000 miles from home, 1,000 worlds away from the boy I had been, and I whispered a prayer. Thank you for saving me, even when it cost me everything. My phone buzzed. A message from a number I did not recognize. It said only this: "You changed my life. I found Jesus because of you." I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I understood what legacy truly meant. Not buildings, not titles, not bloodlines, but lives. The message did not travel like news. It traveled like fire. It jumped borders. It crossed languages. It ignored censorship. It slipped through firewalls and filters and fear. In places where churches had no signs, our interview was watched in living rooms. In countries where Bibles were contraband, our words were copied into notebooks. In cities where belief was whispered, our story was shared in secret groups. It reached students. It reached prisoners. It reached soldiers. It reached mothers who prayed in kitchens with the lights off. And everywhere it went, it carried the same question. If a prince can choose Christ, what about me? I began receiving messages from places I had only seen on maps. From Tehran. I watched your interview at 3 a.m. I cried. I am not alone anymore. From Cairo. My brother believes in Jesus but is afraid. Your courage gives him strength. From Karachi. I copied your story onto a USB drive and passed it to my friends. We meet every Friday. From Riyadh. I am a student. I have questions. I am scared. Please pray for me. I learned that the kingdom had tried to block the video. But the internet has a way of choosing what cannot be stopped. Clips appeared on TikTok. Translations appeared on Telegram. Audio versions circulated on WhatsApp. People memorized lines. My name is Khalid bin Faisal al-Rashid. I was born into one of the most powerful royal families, and I am a follower of Jesus Christ. Those words became more than an introduction. They became a signal, a declaration, a reminder that belief is not owned by nations. It belongs to hearts. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I sat alone in a quiet church. The building was empty. The lights were low. The air smelled of wood and candles. I sat in the back row. No cameras, no microphones, no crowds, just me. I thought about the boy I used to be, the one who memorized verses without understanding, the one who obeyed without knowing why, the one who believed faith was inherited like a name. And I thought about the man I was becoming, a witness, a traveler, a voice for those who had none. I prayed, not like I used to, not with form, not with fear, with gratitude. Thank you for finding me where I was, I whispered. Thank you for loving me before I knew you. Thank you for turning loss into purpose. My phone vibrated. A new message. This one? From a young woman in Saudi Arabia. She wrote, I watch your story every night. I have not told anyone. But now I pray to Jesus. One day I will be free too. I closed my eyes. The palace, the throne, the kingdom, all of it felt like another lifetime. I had lost a nation, but I had gained a family I could not count. My father once ruled men. Now he served them. My mother once lived in silence. Now she spoke life. My sisters once followed rules. Now they followed truth. And I, a boy born into power, had become a messenger of grace. The world did not need another prince. It needed hope. It needed courage. It needed proof that faith is not a chain. It is a door. And once you walk through it, no kingdom on earth can close it again.